Coach, what's something that has to happen Friday that you need to just get out the way that's going to help you kind of get things going with this season?
You know, I think just the first play, and then the first good play and the response to it, and the first play that doesn't go to our way, the response to it. I mean, you know, any game, there's a lot of build up to the first game. You go through spring ball, training camp, and then you play, and then all of a sudden it comes fast. So we just got to go out and respond, good or bad, and once you get going, you just settle in and you play. So.
Jonathan said there was a plan for multiple DBs to sort of rotate in this game, and obviously it's early in the season, but I'm curious if there's anyone that you're especially excited to see get on the field and be able to play in that group.
No, I think, you know, we got a good group. I think our goal in the offseason was to add depth at safety, at nickel, at corner, and I would say that we did that. There's the depth chart coming out of training camp, which we'll hold for ourselves, right? And then there's the depth chart after you start playing games and you see how guys respond under the lights. Because the reality is, it is different from practice to a game. And so, you know, a lot of times you'll see a guy maybe raise his stock a little bit in a game and maybe drop a little bit. So we'll evaluate those things, but we're going into it planning to play a lot of guys.
Aiden West, in particular, is a name that was mentioned. As a young kid, what's he done to kind of pop a little bit?
Maturity. You know, I think the biggest thing when you're a young player, if you have success when you're young, because they're all talented, right? Or they wouldn't be here, or we did a poor job of evaluating them. But maturity, because I think sometimes young guys get in and they get overwhelmed with like being here and like going to class and then, you know, training camp and all that. He's very mature. He doesn't get too high, he doesn't get too low. You know, he'll make a mistake and he'll come back and he'll respond to the mistake. He'll make a play and he'll come back and say, hey, I got to play again. So I think just the maturity.
Sam Edwards is a guy, I know he does a lot of work on special teams, but I'm wondering what makes him an impactful part of the program.
He's a service leader, you know, so he cares about his teammates. He's always looking to help people. No one works harder than him. He understands the game. I'm trying to convince him to coach, but his mom and dad are very against that. So, but I think he'd be an all-star football coach if he wanted to be a football coach. So it's just, I think guys look at him and say, hey, this guy knows offense, defense, special teams. He helps where needed. He helps me if I'm struggling. And they just think he's a really good teammate. So, you know, he's a consummate leader.
Do you remember the first time you met him?
Yeah, because when I got here, the linebacker room was a little bit up in the air. There was all these guys in the transfer portal. We got rid of a couple guys. A couple guys were unsure if they were coming back. Sam was one that they were like, we're not sure if he's going to come back. He can graduate. You know, he might move on, but he played a lot on special teams. And we just, you know, got on the phone and talked and spent some time and sat down and was like, you know, we want you back. Like, I've been at this long enough. Like, those are like glue guys, right? Those make the team. They pull the team together. And when you have guys like that, like I said, they're invaluable. So,
is there worry that with roster limits coming into a bigger effect in the next few years, that you lose those kind of guys?
Yeah, I do. I think so. I think, listen, you know, obviously we evolve with the times and the rules are what they are for reasons that are smarter than me, you know, but I think sometimes you lose some of that, right? Because you're not going to have as many preferred walk-ons. You're not going to have as many guys not on scholarship, and sometimes you miss out on some of those guys, but they'll end up at probably a different place, and they'll do a really good job there too. So,
with Mackay questionable, I guess, what's the depth look like behind you?
Yeah, so I mean, you probably saw what we did after spring. We brought in a bunch of guys in the safety world. So I feel like those guys have all come in, they've acclimated, they've got a lot of reps. We've rotated well throughout training camp from the beginning to the end up till today. So I feel good about the depth. You know, last year, you look at the first game, we had 2 safeties go down for the year and we had 1 get ejected. And we ended up playing a guy who had repped on the scout team all week, and he played like the whole second quarter and the end of the game. So you never know what's going to go on. Like I said, our mission was to add depth and guys who played college football and have experience, and we've done that. So I'm pleased. There's guys that can go in the game and function and play really well for us.
Which true freshman on defense do you expect to play in the opener?
You know, there's possibilities of a couple. You know, there's, you know, West was mentioned, yeah. Derek Simmons is mentioned. You know, so we'll see. You know, but those decisions are made on game situation and guys. I mean, you know, there's a couple linebackers that can end up in the game. I thought Kel Thrush did a nice job for us. So those are all possibilities. There's a variety of guys that would possibly get in there. But, you know, those decisions are made, like I said, off of game decision, and then Coach Smith, you know, signs off on them.
Are
So
those guys more likely to start in special teams and then work their way onto the field on defense? Or-
each guy's plan is different.
Yeah.
And so, like, remember, there's 4 games that they have, and then they have the 5th one. And so there's like 3 levels of guys in my mind as a freshman. There's the guys that you know are playing on offense or defense, and those guys will show themselves as the season shows. Then there's the guys that you're saying, hey, you'd like to get them like the 4 or 5 games and get them in there and get them going. And then there's the guys where you're kind of like, they're probably going to redshirt. And so that's fluid, but, you know, we've had those discussions. We have personnel meetings all the time, but we just try to keep that, you know, in and let it see as it plays.
Joe, what are sort of the top linebackers with Western that you're concerned about?
I think they got good players at tailback position. Number 6, in my opinion, is a Big Ten back. He runs the ball really hard. He's physical. He's got good size. He's got good vision. So he's a guy that I think is a concern. Number 1 is a verified 10.5, so he can roll. And, you know, 4 of the backup running backs at 10.5 too, although I saw that he's been rolled out for the game. So those guys are on the radar. I think college football, though, guys, I think we can all agree, like, the first games are way more unknown than they used to be. They got a lot of transfers. We got a lot of transfers. They got guys that came in. We got guys that came in. It's not as cut and dry as it used to be. So those are the guys that kind of we've really heard really good things. The quarterback, I mean, the guy threw 44 picks and 4,400 yards last year, or excuse me, 44 touchdowns and only 8 picks, and threw for almost 5,000 yards. So he's a guy that's of concern. And then number 12, you know, he can run the ball as well. So he's a dual threat guy. You know, he can throw it and he can run it. So they got some good pieces. They have an offensive lineman that was a starter 2 years ago, was injured last year, and is coming back. So he's got returning experience. They got a center who's from the school down the road. So, I mean, they got a lot of guys that are on the radar.
You know, game one's forever. I've always had unknowns. You mentioned now, though, it's different. Now that there's 4 or 5 years sort of into this movement here, have you noticed, is there anything you've discovered that can make it a little easier, or is it just harder and there's no way around it? When you have to scout, this guy's old school and that guy's old school.
Yeah, I think what it is, you know, back when I started coaching, now remember, this is a D3 school, like, there was super high tendencies on people, right? And it would be like, hey, like, these guys run this formation, they run this play. And so, like, you would really script to that, you would zero in on heavy tendencies. That's not how football is anymore. Like, you hear the term unscouted looks. What that means is, like, people run new plays constantly. They have all these off the field guys who got all these tendencies, and hey, we got this tendency, we got that tendency, let's run this, let's run that. So where the change comes is you have to be more fluid defensively, right? There isn't as much that you can zero in on and say, this is exactly what we're getting. And so you practice to that, okay? You throw a bunch of variables at the guys, you give them a bunch of unknowns, and that's probably the thing that's changed the most. Not only with just the transfer portal, but just as you've gotten into bigger staffs and people become more multiple and more complicated. So,
what makes Jordan Hall capable of being a leader or the leader of the defense?
I would say the first thing is he works really hard. I think if you're going to be a leader, you got to work really, really hard. That's the first thing. The second thing is he's positive. He's a positive communicator and good communicator with his teammates. 2, I think it always helps when you have some abilities as well. Okay, he's a really good player. And then also, I think he's seen the highs and lows and responds. You know, some people, when they get into positions of leadership, like, it's easy to lead when things are always going your way. It's really hard to lead when things go and don't go your way. And he's a guy that I think has shown throughout his career that he does those things. So he's hardworking, he's a positive communicator, he's a good player, and he handles the good and the bad. So that's why he's a good leader.
With the rest of that, you know it pretty intimately. Wayne's probably a guy that's up there.
Yeah.
Darius, and how do you plan on juggling those guys? 'Cause it sounds like also Bridgman, Pulliam, and
Yeah.
Pretzloff all are making pushes.
Yeah, we're going to play more guys than I've ever played before at linebacker. So, and how do we do that? Well, there's going to be guys with roles and different packages and guys that have different jobs to do. And so we'll see a lot of guys in there. Now, I will say the guys who are the guys, which we'll see on Friday, those guys are obviously the guys for a reason, and they're going to get the bulk of the reps. But we're going to play a variety of guys, and we'll have different packages to feature different guys' strengths, and And so I think it is a really good room. And then those guys, the expectation is that they do a great job on special teams. You know, like the backbone of your special team should be your linebacker unit just by nature. And so those guys should show up all over the place on teams.
When you mentioned unscouted looks, it feels like it lends itself to having smarter players or guys who are more aware on the field. And I'm curious how you evaluate that. Maybe the recruiting side of things of like when you have freshmen, how do you notice that they have that sort of mentality and awareness?
Yeah, so like that's an intangible that's a little harder to evaluate. But here's how we do it. One, I think just talking to guys, right? You can usually tell if a guy's sharp or not. Not always, but usually, right? Like you can tell. Like you can have a conversation with them. That's one. Two, the guys follow up with the things that you ask them to do. If you ask them to call, do they call? If you ask them to fill something out, do they fill something out? Like throughout that whole process, I'm looking at that stuff, right? And if a guy constantly doesn't follow up on things I've asked him to do, why do I think when he gets here he's magically going to do it? Because he won't, right? The other thing is we'll evaluate him on the board. Okay, hey, tell us your defense. What's your scheme? What's your read here? And then we'll teach him something. And then we'll come back to it like 3 hours later and say, hey, remember we talked about this? Give that back to me. So like those are all things that we attempt to evaluate because we value having really smart players here. It's something that I think we have a saying, a smarter player is a better player. And a smarter player is going to be a better player in the NFL too. Like with the complexity of the game and the things that they do there too. So that's a good question.
Do you have a sliding scale when it comes to high school versus transfer guys when you evaluate that?
I would say by nature, the transfer guys are going to be way further ahead because they've played college football. So I think it's not fair to evaluate a transfer at the same way that you would evaluate a high school guy. Because a high school guy, what programs he's coming from? Like some of them are real high end, maybe some aren't so high end. So, you know, there is that, and then it just comes down to overall aptitude, right? You know, you might be in a lower level program that doesn't really throw a lot on their players, but if you can tell that they're sharp and they're processing and they've done well for themselves, then we see it. The older guys, when they come from a football program, like you're going to be able to tell right away, like, hey, what's your scheme? What do you do? How do you line up? And if guys are struggling with that, you know, that goes into our decisions on them.
Is it hard to
Last one
unteach
for Coach.
some things if they have those habits rather than a new guy with just a blank canvas?
I think what it is you just got to reteach the verbiage. You know what I mean? What it ends up happening is like they just need to, hey, this term was this here, but it's this here. I think that's more of it, you know? So.
Last one, Connor.
Who's your, this is just housekeeping, who's like, talk about the smarts and the awareness, who's your smartest player you would say on defense? Who has that knack?
See, you're gonna make me, I'm not, listen, we got a bunch of smart players.
Yeah.
Okay? But I'm gonna give you one guy that really impresses me for like 25 reasons why this guy impresses me. But Amarian Smith, you know, he's got things that impress me that I wouldn't be able to be capable of doing at his age, when I was his age. So that's the first thing. But what I would say is like, you know, no one studies the game more than him. Like he knows calls, he knows checks, he proactively makes checks. If something doesn't make sense, he's in my office or Coach Adams' office. Why are we doing this? Not just what are we doing, why are we doing it? Because that's what separates really good players and really good coaches. Not what we do, why are we doing it? And he knows why we're doing things. And so when you know the why, you can execute better. So we got really good ones, but you know, he's a guy that really stands out.
What's next, Coach?
Thank you.